This is Into the Singleverse with Raj Verma. Unfiltered conversations about the latest trends and the tangible effects of real-time data on pivotal industries, our daily lives, and the future of our world.
My guest this week is Ravi Kumar, as CEO of Cognizant. Ravi leads over 350,000 talented associates around the world who are dedicated to the company's purpose of engineering modern businesses to improve everyday life. Beyond technology, Ravi is focused on building a diverse and inclusive workplace at Cognizant, which he sees as a sign of organizational and societal health. Ravi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you for the opportunity, and good to see you again and good to talk to you again.
Ravi, what I wanted to do was just have a good old chat. You and I were way back when, probably about 2.5, 3 decades ago, coming up in India, getting out of school, and this new thing called computers and IT was coming up. Take us through your initial years in IT, how you got into IT, and of course you had a storied run, which is well documented. But where did it all start, and how did it evolve?
Raj, it's very interesting. I didn't plan it that way, but as I look back at it, that contributed to my growth as a leader so far. For the first 10 years, I tried many things. I wanted to find myself as I was trying new things. I started as a nuclear scientist, which really means you work deep into one specific area. Then I ventured into consulting. So I went and did my business school. Then I went and did consulting, which again means you are an individual performer with deep expertise. Then I ventured into sales. Then I actually got to running service lines for tech services companies, tech or digital services companies. I think my sweet spot was when I started to get breadth of things to handle. I think I found myself as somebody who can create a sphere of influence, somebody who can thrive with people around you. And then most of the time since then, I have been in people businesses, either managing a large capability, a large center, or at a large industry. Till I came to the US, where I came in a corporate role to be the president of one of my predecessor companies, where I spent 20 years. And now I'm actually the CEO of Cognizant. So I've actually gone through this journey of working on direct control to working on sphere of influence. And that whole transition really helped me to mature as a leader. The thing I'm always excited about, Raj, is I love the fact that I would like to stay very vulnerable. I mean, I'm one of those people who is ready to ask for help, who wants to be surrounded with people who are not like me. And I'm very vulnerable. And because I'm vulnerable, when I get to the finishing line, I try to punch above my weight. And that gives the best out of me. So I have enjoyed the process of using vulnerability as a strength and not as a weakness.
That's very, very interesting. Now, you starting off as a nuclear scientist explains why I struggle keeping up with you in conversation. So also, I think you touch upon something which is vulnerability and using that as a strength. That's a very evolved way of thinking. I just wanted to, off late, when you go through a process of documenting your journey, you give it a lot of deep thought. And, it's surprising when I sit here in Silicon Valley, you can see this behind me and all the rest, and epicenter of what's happening in the world. And you look back and, at the journey of where you and I started off in India, it was a emerging, it wasn't even emerging. I mean, 91, 92, we were just about opening up from an economic standpoint. We had just started getting Pepsi and Coca-Cola into the country. And from there, it's not only become a powerhouse from an economic standpoint, but the technological advances both in the Indian population and country, and the impact India is having on the technical landscape globally is a journey which is just unfathomable if you and I were to reflect on it 25 years ago, sitting in Bangalore over some coffee and vada paos, if you know what I mean. What do you attribute that evolution, that meteoric rise of India as an IT superpower of sorts?
Raj, there are a bunch of things which make India uniquely different. One is, as you grow up in India, you will appreciate this. There isn't a safety net, if I may. And because there isn't a safety net, you're always trying to, stretch yourself beyond the boundaries. Because of the chaotic way the country has grown over the last few years, your ability to thrive in ambiguity makes you stronger. When you get to a world where a lot of things are organized, you start to believe that thriving in ambiguity helps you to stay innovative and helps you to curate your thinking in a way that you can deal with uncertainty and clock speed. In the times we're all living in, the clock speed is so high that you have to thrive in ambiguity. Equally, the social fabric of India makes you very empathetic. The humbleness of leaving everything there and then coming to a new country where there is upward mobility. I mean, this is a country we underestimate. The upward social mobility in this country, if you have the skills and capability, it's a leveler, and it kind of gives you the unique opportunity to get up. So I do believe that trade of that social fabric on which we grow up helps immensely when you start to get to the corporate world in the United States. And finally, Raj, growing in India, you always get to be a lifelong learner. A lifelong learner, somebody who has the appetite to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think in the world we are living in, where everything dynamically changes around us, we kind of adapt to those situations much better. So some of this is, naturally fitting, and therefore you see a lot more people today in the Fortune 500 who either have an Indian heritage or who have grown up in India, or actually come to the United States as a student and then got the confluence of the two cultures coming together for making impact.
Very well said. I think it's very hard for me to explain to my American colleagues the emphasis that Indian society put on education, at least when I was growing up as a student in India and school and all the rest of it. The entire household focused around the kids' education, and especially STEM, or anything for that matter, but there were dedicated hours for you to study. The parents were very involved in it. There was a social hierarchy based on how well you did academically,
It rubs off for everybody around you. I mean, how the communities around you look at it. There's one other thing, Raj, which also intrigued me always. When you work in a constrained environment, and India is a place of constraints because of limited resources, so you start to think more innovatively. I mean, the whole concept of reverse innovation started in India, where you take a thing and reverse innovate to see how you could frugally build something which serves the same purpose. So the whole concept of reverse innovation, being frugal, being surrounded with constraints and still trying to get to the finishing line, I think gives us uniquely ability to get to the finishing line irrespective of what you have on the way.
That's a fantastic point that you make here, because I think frugality and innovation go hand in hand. Before I get into your journey with Cognizant and where the world of data is going, and of course touch upon a couple of things from a management and leadership perspective, I do think that there is a confusion, at least in the social media, which says that ping pong tables and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and sleep pods and, the latest computers and foot massages are what are required to have companies to innovate. I think that's a good thing. I'm not against them, but I do completely agree with you, and I love to see what your viewpoint is around innovation and what spurs innovation in an organization. Because I agree with you. I think it is constraints and it is frugality. But I'll let you your opine on what you think are a couple of tenets that allow companies to innovate faster than others.
Raj, product companies and software companies look at innovation in a different way to how tech services companies, which are powered on human capital, look at it. Coming into Cognizant, I ran an initiative called Blue Bolt. And the idea was about grassroots innovation. So I didn't believe that innovation has to be in a department. Most companies have this innovation department which does innovation as if everybody else doesn't. So I believe that the 350,000 employees at Cognizant have to be innovative, and it has to be grassroots. So this entire Blue Bolt initiative was to create grassroots innovation. So what we essentially did was we told everybody, look, we will train you on a bunch of tooling and a bunch of, I would say, consultative mindset and design thinking kind of opportunities to orient you. But write something innovative behind your chart of your project. It could be adjacent, it could be incremental, or it could be something new, which you see because you're walking the corridors of your clients and you're engaging with them. And when you write something, we will back you up with human capital or financial capital or resources, which will allow you to prototype and rapidly test what you've written. And sometimes when you are writing the small I, you encounter the big I. We ran this initiative for the last 6 months. We have like 150,000 ideas now, where people have written something, they've put it in the central repository, and we have helped them curate that idea with a central team of experts and with human capital and with financial capital, like a venture capitalist. And occasionally we have found the small eyes coming together with insights for being a big eye, which means you could spin that off as a separate initiative for creating repeatability of that idea, which could either spawn as a solution or a platform or a product. So the concept of grassroots innovation is what I believed strongly in, especially being in a people company, in a people or a human capital company. And it just started to serve us very well with our clients. Today, just as I've been, I've been at a client location, I just came back. The topic of conversation was how many Blue Bolt ideas our teams have written in that client context, and how many they have showcased it as prototypes, and how many are transitioning from being experimental to real production grade work. So that's how I see innovation. Innovation is grassroots for me. Innovation is not top down; it is bottom up.
Very, very insightful. I could stay on that topic for a long while. I do have a question for you, and that's just for my own education. A product company like ours, we do have, I wouldn't say the concept, but the reality of certain engineers being 30x, 100x a normal engineer or an average engineer. A people business, do you have 30x employees, 50x employees, or that concept is more a product organization concept alone?
Raj, I did this test or a thesis, if I may. What's happening to productivity inside the company with generative AI? You'll be astonished when I tell you that the people above the 50 percentile on productivity gained significantly lower using generative AI. And the people at the bottom of that pyramid gained significantly higher, which essentially means the productivity gains for people who are not performing so well was much higher than the productivity gains for people who are performing well. So it is not to the same scale as you have in product companies, but we did see that it is a spectrum on which productivity lies, even for a professional services company like ours. And, we kind of felt like the tooling, the instrumentation, the automation techniques, the AI-led infrastructure benefited developers who were in the bottom 50 percentile and significantly benefited them. In fact, I have stats to tell you. For example, the bottom half benefited by 43%, while the top half only benefited by 17% in our case. So it does lie in a spectrum, not 30x, but it does lie in a spectrum, and sometimes this tooling kind of acts like a leveler. So productivity, in a way, is not a big spread for us in tech services like product companies is, but it does have a spread.
So you speak very passionately about Cognizant, its heritage and more interestingly, I suppose, its future and the art of the possible. Why don't you share that excitement with the audience for a little bit?
Yeah, so Raj, I came into the firm with this Cognizant has a amazing heritage for, I would say, a $20 billion company, which is only 25 years old since listing. Companies of our size in our industry have probably taken 40 plus years. And there are three things which differentiate us from the rest. One is high on client centricity, good entrepreneurial spirit, extremely high on entrepreneurial spirit. I would say we are one of the few companies which are born at the confluence of industry, domain, and technology in our peer group. You would either find companies born with a strong domain expertise or companies born with a strong technology leaning, and we were born in that confluence. Now, as the company grew up, its ability to stay as a big, small company was tested. And my predecessor, who ran for a short period of time, he tried a model of creating controls and supporting that process of remaining a big, small company. And in some ways, it did not work. So I kind of reorganized it to go back to the heritage. And the heritage of Cognizant is all about how do you create a big, small company without centralizing it, and how do you create freedom with guardrails? And freedom with guardrails is all about investing in context, investing in culture, and investing in a common operating model. So my thesis about continuing to stay entrepreneurial, continuing to stay client-centric, continuing to stay as a big, small company, but still growing at scale, still doing it at scale. I mean, for a small company, being entrepreneurial is easy. For a big company, if you want to keep that spirit, and if that's the heritage of this company, it has to be built. I call it the freedom with guardrails. And that freedom with guardrails will come with context, investing in context and not investing in controls, investing in a common operating model, and investing in culture. And once you do this, irrespective of the size and scale you are, you could still retain that entrepreneurial spirit. So that's the company I'm kind of excited to build for the future, so that we kind of lean into the heritage, stay relevant, but continue to scale.
What were the couple of things that surprised you, both good and bad, when you took over? I mean, we've been there before. You take this role as a CEO, and there is a picture that you think is in your head when you walk in through that door, proverbial door at least. And a couple of months in, there are things that surprise you positively, and there are things that surprise you negatively. Would you care to share what surprised you the most when you took over this role?
Yeah, so I would say the things which surprised me. I mean, I have actually been from outside, looked at Cognizant both ways. For a long period of time as a successful company beating my predecessor firm, and for a short period of time, my predecessor firm beating Cognizant. So I've seen the good and bad of Cognizant. I would say what surprised me positively is the pace at which we got back our commercial momentum, and the pace at which we were able to create this virtuous cycle of clients and employees. I mean, we are the tech services business is all about creating self-reinforcing virtuous cycles of clients and employees. Your employees stay with you because your clients are happy. Your clients are happy because your employees are happy. If you're on that virtuous cycle, it's an easy business. If you're not on that virtuous cycle, it's a very hard business. So that surprised me that we were on that virtuous cycle. What surprised me negatively is we weren't taking bold moves and we weren't taking the large deals our peers were doing. For the entrepreneurial spirit of this firm, I actually thought we could have taken much more bolder moves. I'm happy to say that we've made that progress and we've crossed that chasm, if I may, of taking those bold moves and taking those calculated bets. And therefore, a lot of our large deals, which we're winning now, will have been a consequence of some of these step changes we made in our operating model.
Yeah, they also now Cognizant also has a super salesman as CEO, so I'm sure that is helping as well. So you're being too modest not to say that. That's interesting. Just riffing with you on this though, and I am no expert at sort of IT services business or people business. However, you do see majority of the global SIs, including the Indian global SIs, probably making control the central point of their scaling strategy. Would you tend to agree with that? So to that extent, you are sort of swimming against the tide, you're getting the results, but that's a bold initiative in and by itself, correct?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, because of the fact that professional services companies want to scale, but they struggle to be a big, small company. They struggle to keep the entrepreneurial spirit because you then introduce controls on the way. But we should be bold enough to invest in culture, invest in common operating models so that you don't do the controls for building constraints on your business, but you build the controls for compliance and governance. That switch, I think, is an important switch. I would say all the big ones, all the tier one players are probably struggling with the same calibration challenges. And I'm hoping that we have seamlessly made that transition to stay entrepreneurial in spite of a scale.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, again, just as two industry colleagues having a chat, no one switches CEOs because things are going well, right? Unless there is a planned, sort of change, which happened in a couple of other companies. We've seen, and both of us know what I'll be referring to. We've had CEOs who've come into these firms and have tried to bring about a lot of change, and I'm sure it was well-intentioned change. However, that didn't work for them. And I think if you reflect back on it, it was probably them not taking into account the cultural aspect of the heritage of that company and what worked, what did not work. And how do you work within almost the constraints of that culture?
Completely. I mean, when Peter Drucker said culture eats strategy for lunch, you growing up in a business school, you don't fully appreciate that. But as the rubber hits the road and you get to the corporate world, you realize how much culture can either be a constraint on your way for the transformation or either be a catalyst for your transformation. So, I truly believe you have to pace the cultural renewal with the transformation. And you have to actually shape the way you do the transformation based on the culture of the firm.
I couldn't agree with you more. On that, since, you and I have had these conversations before as well, how do you view culture? Because culture is this, sort of term which everyone has a different view to it. After you answer, I'd give you what I thought was the best definition I heard. But what is culture to you? And, for the two of us as CEOs, the culture really starts from the top, whether you like it or not, right? And that's where the voice from the top and all the rest does have an impact. It's not solely governed by that. But yeah, your views on that?
There are various aspects to it, Raj. Culture is an important facet of any transformation you do. It's an integral part of how well you could immerse the company into the change. There is an element of trust which plays an important role in a cultural renewal. Working in large enterprises, I've figured out seeing what is coming is not very difficult. At your vantage point, at our vantage points, we will see what is coming faster than everybody else. And that's because we meet people from different walks of life. We interact with various constituents in our positions. So we see what is coming. And sometimes people feel like they get excited about the fact that they're seeing what is coming. But the bigger virtue, Raj, I've always felt this, is to make everybody believe what is coming and to allocate the resources, the human capital, the financial capital to what is coming, and making everybody believe it. I think I've always found, I found it easy to see what is coming. I found it harder to make everybody believe what is coming, and the paranoia, to set the paranoia about what is coming. In a public limited company, the bigger challenge also is how do you navigate between two swim lanes? One, to see the present, because you're measured on quarterly goals, you're measured on quarterly imperatives, you're measured on how you perform, and you get a runway based on your quarterly performance. So how do you keep yourself relevant to the present, but how do you keep an eye on the future? And how do you make sure that you're throwing kitchen sinks at the future, but still stay relevant for the present? I think that has been a bigger challenge because you're measured from the market, by the market, your credibility, your trust is built based on the performance of today, while you have to constantly pivot to the future. For a new age digitally native company, that is less of a problem because their present is the future. They have very little legacy to work with. For a existing large enterprise, navigating the two, I think is a much harder task. And the short-term imperatives, you have to balance the short-term imperatives with the long-term, which kind of makes it harder. So how do you make sure that you still win in the present, though you take your best people, invest into the future, you take your financial capital, put it into the future, you take your resources and put it into the future, but you stay relevant in the present. So that, I think, is the most difficult part of the cultural change in any transformation.
That's very, very well put. Just a question that I've always asked people and my cohort of CEOs as to how do you not let the culture tend towards entitlement, especially as you get to scale and you get to resource. How do you balance that, Ravi, at Cognizant?
The famous strategy consulting theory of splitting your business into horizon 1, 2, and 3, I think is a very good way to measure yourself. As you go up the chain, you think you should spend more on horizon 3 and less on horizon 1. And if you can evaluate whether you're investing into the future by seeing how much of your best people are on horizon 3, how much of your financial capital is in, how much your capital expenditure is on horizon 3, how much of your expenses on horizon 3, and how much little time you as a CEO is spending on 1, but spending more on 2 and spending a lot more on 3 will determine how well you do. The reality, though, Raj, is if you're in a steady ship, that phasing out is relatively easy because you're running a smooth ship. You can orient yourself to the future. If you're actually running on a ship which is not stable, you will end up doing more of 1. And it's a vicious negative cycle because if you end up doing more of 1, you will end up missing the 3. And if you're missing the 3, you will continue to end up doing more of 1 and you will become inconsequential. So it's a vicious cycle. So the more I think about it, the leadership underneath is very, very important because you can then allocate a leadership to focus on 1 and 2 and move yourself to 3, provided the 1 and 2 is efficiently run. So it's a fine balance between how you look at the business of the past, look at the business of the present, and orient yourself to the business of the future.
Just so that I understand, Horizon 1 being your steady state business, Horizon 2 being your next bet.
Horizon 1 being business of yesterday, Horizon 2 being business of today, and Horizon 3 being business of the future. If you orient yourself into these three things and start to see how much time you're spending on each of them and how much time your leadership, how much you can relegate it down so that you get time on Horizon 3, I think will determine how well you are focused on keeping your business relevant.
Ravi, switching, you can't have a podcast or a conversation without talking about generative AI in these these times, right? And I also know that you spend a lot of time on philanthropy, etc. So I wanted to talk to you about two things. One, of course, generative AI. What are you seeing? What do you think is the future with AI, both from how companies could benefit and then society benefits? And then on the second aspect, which I'll probably ask after you answer the first, would be what are some of the things as a society we should watch out for in this wave of AI that's coming our way? But let's start with, what do you think is the impact right now on businesses, and what's your prediction over the course of the next 3 years, how businesses would be impacted by this?
Raj, this is a topic which has been discussed so extensively. So I don't want to talk about areas where, the audience and you would have heard this multiple times. I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective on generative AI, which might be useful for the audience. And I'm going to pivot it to two theses I have. Depending on where we pivot, we're going to land the world in a more prosperous zone, or we could land the world in a less prosperous zone. The more I think about it, AI is certainly going to take away jobs of the past, but create significantly more jobs of the future. If you look at upward mobility in jobs, if you assume that AI is going to take away jobs at the bottom of the pyramid, you would assume these people with the right skilling will create upward mobility for themselves, and therefore it will be a leveler. Productivity leveling will happen in some form because there is going to be upward mobility and people will move up. Look at America. In the United States, every month, even today, 4 million people leave their jobs every month, which is 48 million people a year, which is 1/3 of the US workforce. These people are in hospitality, healthcare, hotels, retail. They don't live the American dream. They earn $20 an hour, and they believe there is no upward mobility in their jobs. And equally, the United States roughly makes 300 to 400,000 jobs a month. These are high-paying digital jobs of the future. Now, if you assume that AI is going to create that upward mobility for people, you have a human in the loop, it creates higher productivity, it takes the grunt work out, and therefore people create upward mobility. You do the right skilling, you create a leveler. So I think AI can be that leveler, it can be that equalizer. That's my first thesis. The second thesis is AI doesn't do anything to the bottom of the pyramid. On the contrary, it de-skills. It doesn't upskill a job, it de-skills a job. Because it de-skills a job, the people at the highest paid employees start to get paid less because you're going to de-skill. This is what happened in the Industrial Revolution when the livelihoods of artisan weavers was completely destroyed by mechanized looms. And mechanized looms really took that away. And the art of writing code, for example, today can be completely taken away by AI, which means the most paid employees can start to go down. And of course, there will be leveling again because the people who are being paid for specialty are going to be paid less. It's already happening in the gig platforms where the number of jobs are starting to go down and the wage rates are going down. If that happens, the leveling will still happen because of AI, but we're not going to pivot to a prosperous future because the people at the bottom will still remain at the bottom. The people at the top are starting to go down. And which means you are going to find a leveling of sorts, but you're not going to find, the overall wage rates, the uplift of the overall wage rates happening. So depending on where we pivot, we're going to find a very different outcome. One of the things I have personally worked on is I call it the jagged productivity. Jagged means uneven edge, irregular to the quality. What I mean by that is, if you look at what AI is doing, the utility of AI, it fluctuates in a developer's workflow with some tasks falling inside the frontier of AI and some tasks falling outside the frontier. So effectively, what is happening is some tasks are easily done by AI, while others, though seemingly similar in difficulty, outside the current capability of AI. So all within the same knowledge workflow of tasks, which then means that you need a human in the loop in that jagged productivity, which is a good thing because you will amplify human potential using AI. You're not going to replace a human. So, it's a interesting observation because you have to strategically switch between humans and AI for subtasks and integrate AI and human capabilities at a granular subtask level for you to get the kind of productivity you have to. So this is something I've been researching on. I have some stats to talk about. We've used it in our own developer productivity ourselves to see how the developer workflow changes and how do you integrate AI and humans together in that jagged productivity.
Very interesting. Just to reciprocate and just share with you what I heard. Like you said, we always have these conversations around AI in any forum or most forums that we attend these days. And the most succinct definition that I got, at least how I internalized it, I'll just share it with you and see what you think about it. What it said at the very, I won't say bottom, at whichever order, the easy tasks would be automated. The hard tasks will become easier, and impossible would be made possible. Now, if you define these three tenets, and the basic conversation that I was having with this individual or organization was around the role of incumbents and startups in this new era of innovation and generative AI. And really, if you see the easy becoming automated, incumbents. The hard becoming easy, usually, probably, mostly incumbents. And the role of startups like us or anywhere, well, probably a little more than a startup now, but I was just going to say the impossible becoming possible is probably an area where a lot of dollars will go into from an organizational standpoint. However, naturally, like with most things impossible, the rate of success is going to be a lot lower. And just one other point, we had Vinod Khosla, who you know very well as well, on the show. And he made Vinod, he makes bold predictions. And he says, the job of a software developer, gone. In 10 years, gone. And then he said, well, gone as in, the role of a doctor is now sort of taken over by automation. But what he says is 50% of what people do, developers do right now, would be automated. But what he said, which was very interesting and thought-provoking to me, he says those 30x developers or 10x developers with AI will be 100x developers. So the human ability, like a bicycle, amplifies the human ability for speed and makes it the fastest mammal. AI will actually, for those 10x, 30x engineers or what have you, resources, they will become 1000x resources. But we'll see how that works. But I am an eternal optimist, and I do think that when used rightly, this could be one of the things which propels at least the disadvantaged and the vulnerables in society to an equal playing field. But that will take courageous leadership. And I've always admired you for your leadership. You're just one CEO, no matter which employee of Cognizant or your previous organization that I met, they always speak very fondly of you. With a great amount of respect, both for your ability and for your empathy. What are some of the leadership tenets that you knowingly or unknowingly sort of practice to be that?
Raj, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. And I think you're bang on your first topic, which is if you're taking the impossible and making it very possible, taking the harder task and making it simplified, which means the specialists will start to get less. But that's not the purpose of AI. The purpose of AI is to say the people who were stuck at the bottom, if we can reskill them and move them up, and the specialists go down, that's a prosperous world we all will thrive to work on. I mean, there are only 20 million developers in the world. Machine learning algorithms gave a huge boost to developers to consumerize technology. AI is going to humanize technology because you're handing over that agency to the end user. And there has never been a discontinuity in the past. In the past discontinuities in our generation, where anything of this kind has humanized technology as much as AI is going to do. So I actually completely agree with what you just said. The thing I feel most rewarding on my role is the impact I could make to 350,000 employees and their families. That is, there's nothing which beats the purpose of the platform to do that. The small things we do for our employees every day, walking the corridors, makes them feel excited to come the next day and perform better. When I left my previous job, Raj, I spent 20 years there. I put a LinkedIn post, and on the LinkedIn post, I wrote about leaving my predecessor firm and joining Cognizant. And I had a garden leave, so I was looking at all the comments people were writing. It had roughly 2 million hits because my previous company was also 300,000 employees. So 300,000 employees of that company, 300,000 employees of this company, and the past employees of these companies, they kind of see this post. Most people never discussed the big things I did or the big impact initiatives I did in those posts. The comments were all about the small things I did for them in their daily lives. Somebody writing to me saying that, oh, you did this small thing to me in 2015, I remember, and stuff like that. So my endeavor, my resolve to do those small things every day at a workplace, which leaves a strong impact and a strong influence to people, is what I believe is all leadership about. This is an honor to be on this platform, and you want to seize that opportunity to make that impact for the people who look up to this platform for impact. So that's what makes me excited every day about the job I do.
That's fantastic. Ravi, one final question. I was number 2 in a couple of organizations, and I always had a different lens to the job of a CEO. Always thought it was bloody easy and how I could do it with one hand tied behind the back. And when I took over the CEO's role, I realized how this was order of magnitude different to anything that I had done before. What surprised you the most about being a CEO versus being, you were president of a very large company, etc.? What were the couple of things that actually surprised you when you took the CEO pointy end of the spear job?
I think, Raj, you're absolutely right. Very spot on observation. I mean, till you get to this seat, you realize how different this job is to what you did before. And I felt the same way. I think, how do you filter? Because everybody wants to tell you the good news as you get to this spot, and you're in some ways lonely there. How do you make sure that you get the bad news coming to you in a very seamless way? And how do you make sure that people around you are not just telling you the things you want to listen to, but the things which you believe, things you want to know because you want to make a difference? I think that has been a big change. The second is integrating every constituent into your decision-making process. Most jobs below the CEO are functional jobs. You're either the head of sales, or you're the head of the service lines, or the head of the products, or head of marketing, or the chief financial officer of the company. you're always leaning into one thing as a major and everything as a minor. As a CEO, you have to lean into every decision integrated with every constituent. It isn't like one day you meet investors, the another day you think about clients, the another day you think about employees. When you make a decision on employees, you're thinking about clients and investors. When you're talking to investors, you're thinking about clients and employees. When you're talking to clients, you're thinking about employees and investors. So that integration into every decision you make, I think there isn't a minor and a major dimension there. Everything is at the same level. So I kind of felt like that was a big shift in how I make decisions.
I thought, it's funny you say this. The sort of context switching of my day went 3 orders of magnitude different from a CEO to, being COO even. And I often joke, and, we land on a slightly funny note. I say to people that when I became CEO, I got funnier and lonelier at the same time, And it's actually true that you tend to do that. Ravi, it's an honor and a privilege to spend time with you. Of a lot of things that I'm grateful in life, calling you my friend is high on the list of that. You're building something great, and the fact that I get to see it is indeed a privilege and an honor. So thank you for being on our show.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you for that wonderful conversation. Being a friend, I always lead into you to ask for help whenever I can. Every time I meet you, the one thing which you always rub off on me is your eternal optimism on everything around you. And you're always smiling, always, I always wonder whether you bury the stress inside, but we always delightful and super energetic. So thank you for being who you are.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
This was Into the Singleverse with Raj Verma. If you want to learn how to unleash the immense power of data, go to singlestore.com. Into the Singleverse is a production of Forbes Books.